For those of you who don't know who we are, CIOCAN is a community of just shy of 550 Canadian CIOs, CISOs, and IT executives. Our mission is to facilitate networking, the sharing of best practices, executive development, and to collaborate on issues facing our CIOs and IT leaders. Today's fireside chat is based on the white paper, Low-Code Development for CIOs, Essential Recommendations for IT Leaders, and is a result of the collaboration between our members and our incredible sponsors from DAZZM. Thank you all for your support and your investment in the CIOCAN community. After our initial discussion today, we're going to have a brief Q&A period for anyone wishing to learn more or share any related insights to today's topic. From our collaboration on this white paper with our sponsors from DAZZM and their expertise in low-code development, we learned a lot about what is on the minds of CIOs. You can clearly see from their comments here that there is a lot to unpack. And as we do so, and we dive deeper and explore how IT organizations are leveraging this approach in their digital transformation journey. Okay, let's get started. I'd like to introduce you to our moderator, Rita Lezartip, the Chief Digital Officer for Cashco Financial and CIOCAN Honorary Member. Rita has over 25 years of experience in digital transformation, data, and innovation in the private and public sectors and the not-for-profit sector. In her current role as the Chief Digital Officer for Cashco Financial, Rita is responsible for overall digital vision and strategy while influencing a digital organization's culture, strategic direction, and ensuring business efficiency, effectiveness, and optimal operational management. Sylvain Hamel, the co-founder and vice president of DAZZM, is driven by unwavering passion for enterprise application creation. Sylvain is dedicated to advancing low-code technologies, accelerating digital transformation, and fostering an inclusive environment for software creation. With over 30 years in software development, Sylvain is defined by his devotion to agility and the user experience. And now I would like to turn this over to our esteemed moderator. Take it away, Rita.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lorraine. First things first, the most important part, go Oilers. Yes. Canadian team, we got to be there for them. So very excited that they're coming back to Edmonton, I should say. So looking forward to, hopefully they're not going to goof up game 6. I didn't say that out loud. So that's awesome. So first of all, Celine, thank you so much for being with us today. It's absolutely a pleasure to see you again. And I'm really looking forward to our fireside chat and your perspectives that you're going to share with us. Lots of absolutely fantastic experience, insights, and really, I think it's going to be a very, very engaging conversation. So as technology continues to shift and enable organizations, it really is becoming the business. And I know a lot of us have been saying that it's, partially the business or it isn't, but it's really shifting towards being the business, which is really exciting, I think, for all of us. And when we look at low code, no code is becoming a differentiator on many fronts. And even according to Gartner, when, kind of where their perspective is, portion of low code applications users who are not in IT departments will grow from, this is their quote, is going to grow from 60% in 2021 to 80% by 2026, which is huge. And again, it's a significant differentiator. So we've got a lot of content, so let's get right into it. Let's get started. And perhaps maybe we'll start, excuse me, with why low code, no code is important to IT leadership. So Savine, over to you. Oh, I have to tell you, you're on mute.
Such a classic. Sorry about that. Yeah, so that's a great question. And the reason why I think low code is important to IT leadership is understanding the way it changes the way you approach digital transformation. It changes the way you see projects. Big projects become smaller, less risky, more focused on delivering business value than creating original technology. Because the projects we attack today in the enterprise are rarely very technical in terms of what they do. They revolve around workflows and capturing data and storing data in databases and then exchanging the data with other systems in the enterprise, and they don't necessarily require the traditional approach to code in several ways. That's one part. The other part is several projects have been put aside by traditional development because they're too small and they rarely fit the plan for development teams to say, we have this project, and when we look at it in terms of how many use cases or screens it would be to create that application, it would be a 5 to 10 screen application that in the no-code world will be executed within, you don't know, 2 to 6 weeks. But those projects don't fit the plan for IT traditional, generally speaking. So it's a new opportunity, and IT leaders need to see that on that second side, that there are lots of small opportunities that we've been saying no, or we've been, maybe ignoring and putting aside for years because they wouldn't fit the plan, and we would, users and people in business units would end up staying in Excel and staying in makeshift solutions because there was no real solution provided by IT or by custom software development. So that's one part.
Yeah, and I think something that you touched on is really important
dashboard.
is those
Let's
small
help
type.
documentation.
Oh, we got someone who's not on mute. We've got these small incremental type of initiatives, and
Yeah,
because
there's some
they're
links that you can
there-
drill down. But
there's not as much of an impact or perceived impact to the business. But when we think about those 1% incremental changes, they're significant when you aggregate them together to the organization. So I think it's really important to look at it in totality rather than just these snippets of opportunity. So I think that's what really resonates with me, I think, as we move forward through this. So that's great. And
Yeah, another thing, go ahead.
No, go.
I was going to say, another thing is that the other way that it's important is because right now in several teams, developers are very busy maintaining core systems, right? And they don't necessarily have time to start new projects that are less mission critical or business critical, and that are more revolving around optimizing processes or employee experience. A lot of users today, employees, end up working with, I'd say, mediocre solutions when they deserve actual applications that are robust, but sometimes there's no place for those, and even more so in the no code, low code landscape.
And as we in this current emerging environment where there's so much focus on user experience, both internal and external, really incorporating that into your overall strategy, perspective, and prioritization plays a really critical part. So I'm glad you included that, because that's an important aspect. So we talked a little bit about the technology piece of it, but there's also the people on the process side. So that becomes a really important component. And so how do you see low code, no code fitting within the people in the process? And then how does it also fit into the technology ecosystem? So we talked a little about some of the components, but from a broader perspective in the ecosystem, it would be good to provide a little bit of that perspective as well.
Yes, starting with people and process. Hard to put to separate the two. They go together in the way I think about it. So it affects two groups. On one side, clients, the way clients interact with custom software development initiatives when the team is tooled with low code and uses pushes agility, that we've been talking about agility since 2000, but it's changing. It's becoming hyper agility in the way we do it, and it changes the experience for clients a lot. The way they need to, how much we need to ask them to know upfront about their project has changed completely with low code. They don't need to know as much as we need. And iterative software development wants that, but when you have low code, it changes that quite a bit, and we're going to talk about that a bit more during our chat. But that's one part. The other part, of course, is who creates project and how do they do it, and it affects professional developers in one way. They can see their work as being focused on functionality and creating the actual implementing the actual functionality that the software is required, or that the business requires, more than working on technical parts. So it makes them more efficient, speeds their work, spend less time debugging code, basically working on value-adding activities more than on crafting code. But there's also the empowerment of all the other non-professional developers that can put their hands into the code, into the no code, I should say, and start building solutions. And I see it at two different levels. It's IT professional within IT, which are not developers. We empower them, or local empowers them in a very significant way, because they are used to thinking in terms of projects and IT solutions, but they lack the proficiency to code, to actually write code, but they can think in terms of screens and use cases and workflows. And very often in the IT departments, they are the ones that receive requests very, very early in the pipeline to understand the need of a business unit and decide whether, align that need and try and fit a solution to it. So these people can start creating application on their own and become solution creators, basically, not developers. And it changes the role of analysts and product owners and UI and UX experts, where the main output of their work can become working software, not documentation or intermediary artifacts. And of course, it changes our end users and eventually citizen developers, which is basically the title we give to people in business lines that use local no code to modify and evolve or meet or even create software. So that's the people part.
I'm glad you brought up the citizen development, because that's a perfect way to be able to define it. I think people have a different understanding of what that is and a different frame of reference. So appreciate you incorporating and clarifying what that means, because sometimes people have a perspective of it's just anybody, crowdsourcing or anything else, but it's more contained than that, and it has more of the oversight as well.
Yeah, and in terms of processes, I see three things. Development teams wanting to accelerate and retool themselves and use low code as a new mean to create software. Then there's the plan where IT creates a team, a SWAT team revolving around releasing low-code applications that will be beside the traditional development teams, either because they're too busy maintaining actual core systems, or because it's just easier to introduce a new group with a new focus revolving around smaller projects and rethinking the way you do it. I think both works. I think the localized, specialized team might be easier in some organizations to get started, and then maybe transition to development teams, and also transition to citizen development. I think it's important for IT to understand and master the tool before they give it in the hands of end users. You said end users or citizen development. It's not because it's low code that it doesn't require any guardrails or rail guards.
Yep, absolutely. And maybe just touch really briefly on the impact when we talk about the technology ecosystem, because I think that's important. There's, you've outlined already so many different touch points along the path there, but just so people have a sense of, okay, so where are some of those opportunities when you're looking at holistically on the technology landscape?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, because one thing I see is some organizations use more than one local platform, because the local and no code is a category of tools, and some of them are more tailored at some audiences than others. I think from an IT leadership point of view, it's important to pick tools that will fit well in the organization's architecture. The overall plan about how my applications are going to work together, how these applications created with local tools will integrate and collaborate with existing applications and the other applications that are planned for the future. So I think that's one part that's very important. The other part is that there's low code and there's cloud. And it's two different things, but they can be together. So are you getting a local platform that runs on-prem, or are you getting a local platform that runs in the cloud? And you would get, so on one end, you could do traditional dev on-prem or traditional dev in the cloud, or you can do low code on-prem or low code in the cloud. It's also a very different thing, because when an organization picks a platform that runs on the cloud that is supported by the vendor or manufacturer, they get a different experience. It's a out of the box, ready to use experience, whereas the one that runs locally will have different characteristics. So I think that's another point to keep in mind. So where it fits in terms of technology is also where it fits in terms of communicating with existing software assets. It's super important that organization, even when it's business unit led, don't create applications that encapsulate and hide business value in a way that's unable to reuse or leverage it outside its original purpose. And if it's created in a way where we don't think about that, we're going to get to the details, APIs and things like that. If we don't think about APIs up front, and the application is created in some kind of a encapsulated black box thing, then you've created value, but you're not able to leverage it outside its original purpose or goal. So I think it's another important aspect is low code, if done well, can help create a flexible and decoupled architecture in terms of how applications and workflows are connected together.
Yeah, and I think it's really important when we talk about the modularity, right? We're in this whole now, the expedited timeline in terms of delivery, expectations of business outcomes. The modularity becomes really critical because it does give you quicker speed to market. It gives you that repurpose, like you've outlined, and becomes really a differentiator, I think, for a lot of organizations. So we've talked, quite a bit in terms of kind of the theoretical. You've got some great customer success stories, and we want to make sure we bring that forward because we want to make sure that our audience see that how does that connect to live type of experiences and various different organizations where they've benefit from that. So maybe before we jump too far into that, can you just briefly talk about, is there a consistent thread across all of the different, use cases and the benefits that you're able to demonstrate?
Well, I would say speed at which we can deliver, at speed local delivers, the speed at which it delivers, it makes such a big difference when the delay between idea and actual working software is counted in weeks. It makes a big difference. And I've seen that across all projects, all the projects we've worked and all clients we've helped. One thing that comes out is how quickly they can see an idea unformed get converted into working software very rapidly. And that's one key element that I find, and both IT and clients see that as a very, very different way of approaching software.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I told the audience we have a lot of content, and we do, so we're going to try to get through it pretty quick because we want to make sure you've got some visibility into the use cases for sure. So in looking at any of your use cases, can you maybe briefly outline the challenges that you faced and how was your team able to overcome them?
Is there a specific area of challenge you're thinking about?
I think, when you talked about a big component of it is really around requirements, outdated applications, there's those types of where we've got legacy applications. We all do. We all have to go through some of those pain points and the tech debt that's coincide with that. And, shifting that, needing to modernize and eliminating the manual processes, I think is really a critical component of that.
Yeah. Well, when you approach this at scale, understanding as a company, we are going to do digital transformation and replace all the Microsoft Access databases that no longer work the way we want them to work, or we are trying to transform the way how people are using Excel and email and want to create applications for that. I think I think companies are looking for a way to do that on a scalable, repeatable way. And I think one part of that is really about making sure that you have a platform on which you can build, not a platform in the sense of a local platform that allows you to create one application, but one in terms of how are we going to approach this at scale, knowing that we're going to grow our portfolio of applications and things like that. And one thing that a robust choice in terms of local solution will bring is the security of starting a project and knowing it's in a safe environment, safe in terms of cybersecurity, in terms of governance, and in all of those other aspects that are so important that you can't rush. And if you are in a context where you can deliver quickly, and we're possibly going to talk about the cases where a crisis arises and you need to do software like in 2 weeks from now, you need to have it in 2 weeks from now. That's one example. We helped a client during the COVID where they health workers were sick and they had to assign health workers to take care of health workers, up to 80 people assigned to taking care of health workers. And while this is a crisis and the hospitals are full and you need to move fast. And when they came to us, we delivered an application within a few weeks, and they were able to get tremendous advantage of that. But that's only doable if you do this in a framework where you know that it's going to be secure and safe. You can't improvise a solution extremely fast if you don't do it on a solid platform where you know data is going to be secure, even more so when you're managing patient information and healthcare employee information. You have to do this in a very safe environment. And I think that when organizations choose a local platform, they should think about the fact that sometimes applications will be created like this, very fast, and they need to know that wherever they put the new UI, the new database, the new workflow, even if it's almost improvised, it's enterprise grade in the terms of where it lives and the way it fits. And I think it's very important because you don't want to, you go too fast and you put your data at risk. That's not worth it.
So maybe touch really quickly. So I had the pleasure of seeing a few of these business success stories, customer success stories. So I'm gonna pick on a couple of them if that's all right.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the children, or outline in terms of the children's hospital, I think some of those aspects, maybe if you can spend a minute just describing what activities that were undertaken, what did that look like, what was the outcome? I think that would also help provide additional context for the audience.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good example of an organization who's decided that IT would retool themselves and empower themselves in a way to create applications and to support different cases. So they have several cases they want to implement. So first, it's classical. We're going to replace Excel by proper solutions. We've mentioned that already, and replace existing deprecated Microsoft Access applications. But there are also cases where we're looking at creating new digital experiences for employees. I'm thinking of a case where the organization wants to rework the way employees and nurses get their annual review and competency check in terms of all the criteria they have to meet. And those are the type of projects we can help doing. And one part that my client was thinking about is they were choosing different platforms for different cases. And they said, if we create applications that manage clinical or employee information or something that's maybe not customer facing in terms of to the client, but to large enough user base, internal employees, but still at that point you need to provide the proper level of digital experience. They would pick a platform that would fit that. So not all platforms can do proper UX. Some platforms are optimized to create internal apps where UI and UX and intuitivity don't matter all that much, and some others are better to create digital experience that are well designed and focused.
Perfect. Thank you. So we're going to pivot a little bit. We're going to talk a bit about cost and time, which is all very near and dear to our hearts, especially in CFOs. They're part of our organization. So just curious about, the customer. Did the customer assess the cost in time and funding that it would take, would be taken from a conventional software or any other options versus using low code, no code?
Yeah. In that sense, well, the thing it's two things, right? There's the cost of not doing it, because the thing is, so those projects, we're going to be back to, it's a new type of opportunity. So it's the cost of not doing it, because the cost of doing it is not, it's not very expensive when you think of a project and you can implement your project in 2 to 6 weeks. It's become very reasonable to do lots of projects that way. So for the client, it was the mere fact that now they could do those type of projects. So it's not even comparing low code versus traditional. In the traditional world, they would not even have evaluated that project. Just clearing out of the gate, saying it doesn't fit, and it's never going to be cost effective to do this project using traditional development, because several development projects require quite a bit of startup, and even more so when there's no reusable architecture, something that's very reusable. Because if you do a small project custom with traditional development, you're still going to go through a sprint zero architecture, and that takes, if you're lucky, weeks. Whereas if you pick the right platform, that the startup time is zero. So it does change that quite a bit. That makes me think about an idea about how the impact of low code in development teams is it has to change the way you prioritize and scale and scope projects. Because if you have your big 2-year project coming and 3 weeks project coming, you have to find a way for those little smaller projects to be weaved in, and so that you don't have to wait after the longer projects.
It's almost like you read my mind. So, talking about development teams and impact, organizations, I've got in my organization, I've got a development team, and there's obviously an impact in terms of how do you think about it? What's the shift? So how do companies need to think about that transition of development teams and their value now when we think about low code, no code?
Yeah. Well, first thing is, where do we start? And that's going to get back to, do we start with empowering developers and trying to look at how are we going to create new projects, greenfield development? That's one part where we say, where does it fit? Where doesn't it fit, right? In terms of, if you're an organization working on 10 major projects, maintaining core systems, and you look at how low-code can help you, it's probably or low-code enterprise application development is probably going to help you with new projects, greenfield development, and say, when we do that project, let's see if it's doable with low-code, and several projects are. And so that's one part, right? And and the other part is being able to adapt to the fact that you're going to deliver several projects. So that's another part. You have to get ready for that and make sure you have a way to receive those projects and plan them.
And you've done, probably some significant large types of initiative with large organizations, I should say, and the various different initiatives that have been undertaken with that. How do you see the impact on both mid-size and large-size organizations, and how do IT leaders need to think about these opportunities? And you've touched on it a bit before, but just specifically, in your use case, when we think about that customer success, maybe you can just really briefly let us know what that looked like in the transition that's occurred.
I see that in two ways. It's either big in terms of how big the project is, or big in terms of how much impact it has in the enterprise architecture. It could be both. So on one side, one thing to keep in mind is that low code, no code is ready for complex projects of bigger size. So it means that, for instance, I'm thinking of a client where we created a major system that reorganized the way people work in hospitals, nurses and health professionals. It was a 2-year project, several people, and it's still going on today. And that's the type of project that would have been created with traditional development before, but this is created at the speed and at the pace and with the level of agility that local brings. And what I think is very important about that, in terms of what the organization gains, and it's even more so in large organizations where sometimes trying to move the big boat is difficult, when you can do very iterative development and start from an idea and go to the client and get their point of view and vision of how they envision the software they need, the solution they need, without having to go through extensive documentation, and just start and get going. And then there's change management also in terms of the impact of introducing software in large user communities is something that can be challenging. And I think that involving users very early in the process, in the feedback-driven loop, is very important for those larger project, larger initiative, to gain traction within the user base, even before they get to their first day of training or implementation of the software, because they're involved on a weekly basis, seeing working applications grow before their eyes, so that by the time you go live with the software, they already know it, they like it, they know they add their words to saying that. So that's on the bigger organization trying to implement, develop, and deliver bigger solutions. When you look at bigger organizations from an IT perspective, for me, it's all about enterprise architecture, making sure applications fit and you don't create. I'm repeating what I said earlier, but you're not creating components that are opaque and where it's impossible to leverage them. So in order to do that, you need to think about APIs and event-driven system. So APIs are super important. That's the way you connect applications. And whenever you create a workflow or you store data or you implement business logic somewhere, if you have not provided APIs, you've only provided user interfaces for mouse and keyboard and screen, you're limiting yourselves in terms of how you're going to be able to connect things together and recompose your high-level macro workflows, workflows in terms of data flows and workflows. And the other part is event-driven architecture. Event-driven architecture has been around for a long time, but it has often been seen as something like maybe a goal that's like a ultimate goal that is not necessarily pressing. But now that there's a tendency to create smaller interconnected applications instead of monolithic applications, real-time event processing becomes much more important. It's about observing what happens in one system and reacting and triggering workflows and invoking other systems. And that part's very important too. And I think IT leaders need to think about the fact that when they use low code to create applications, those applications should be able to play well in that loosely coupled enterprise architecture.
And I think you touched on a lot of really important points. I'm just going to kind of reiterate them. So one is the agility, and the agility of how we work and how we deliver and the expectations, quite frankly, right now of all organizations that have on technology teams to be able to be more agile, to be able to deliver faster, to be able to demonstrate outcomes in a much more engaging, I guess, collaborative way is probably the best way to put it. And then absolutely in terms of the composability, in terms of applications, and thinking about what's the significant factors that play into that. And that's seamless integration, that's speed to market, that's security, that's architecture as you've outlined. And then getting into the whole notion of secure APIs. We're starting to leverage those by far, but the security is not something that I think that a lot of people tend to think about, or it's a little bit further down the line of priority, if you will. So yeah. I think all of those are important.
And APIs are also important when you think about AI and how AI is going to be able to connect APIs together, right? People are talking about, will AI replace coders and things like that? Those are questions for who knows when, but it's future, right? But will AI be able to connect my systems by leveraging APIs and events? There's something around that, and having an event-driven architecture and good APIs everywhere is how you're going to be able to leverage AI and connect your different systems together. That's one place where AI will help.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities in that space. It's just figuring out what's the right tool for the right job. I think that's where it's going to become a bit of an interesting one.
Correct.
So I just want to circle back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier in one of your use cases, which was more around that larger impact on having a large audience and from a hospital perspective. And it's a little bit difficult sometimes when you look at those large types of organizations to clearly outline and quantify, value, if you will. So is there is there a way to determine or capture ROI that, our audience can potentially leverage, or that you've had in your experience, that when it's not as clearly defined, that will persuade potentially business stakeholders to take those opportunities?
Well, one way to measure success, I think, is user satisfaction, uh, and there's in measuring how people feel about how the solution have improved their work experience in this application, to help understand the impact it would have on the client and users, and to ease the transition into using that system. We've included gamification in the application, where the user it gets what's the word? They get good points for achievements for behaving or using the application as expected, and that's a way to engage users. So user engagement is very important in terms of having success with software. That's not necessarily newer in low code. It's just easier to implement in low code because things go so much faster, so you're able to create solutions like that. I'd say for the client, what I say is that we started with projects that were relatively small in scope. Well, they were big, but somewhat small. But the thing is, the client, the level of enthusiasm of the client in trying to extend what the software does in terms of capabilities, and involving it and extending it and thinking about the next version and the next version and the next version, is a sign that in terms of software, it does help, right? And the third level is, in several cases, clients didn't have any visibility into KPIs. They were not measuring. They were in Excel, they were in Trello, and they couldn't, they were not, it would be difficult for them to say whether or not they had improved, because they didn't have any measure of the previous state of things. They had some measures because they were, people assigned to extracting information from Excel, and, trying to give some reports and bring them into BI solutions and things like that. But it's not real-time reporting when you can actually change your decision today based on the dashboard that you see today that reflects how things are working in your process in real time. So I would, yeah, that's, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts for sure. There's a lot of different things to take into account, and I think it comes back to, you might have to create some new KPIs. You might have to look at it from a different perspective to really be
Yep.
able to quantify that, and maybe not in a traditional way that we've done in the past. So again, it's about finding that balance. Quick, I keep saying quick to market because I'm feeling it. We've got right now an implementation with low code, no code type of a platform. And to your point, it feels a little bit unsettled sometimes to the developers, because now they don't need that same level of engagement, but they have shifted the way that they can be more on the advisor side, and how they can contribute in a different manner than traditionally maybe would have expected. So it's the shifts that continue to happen, and it continues to drive that value in a different way. And just, I think the business will realize when they see the advantages in a quicker turnaround time, that speaks volumes. I think that's a significant component for sure. So you talked a little bit about, an example of where you had a client during COVID and how they were able to quickly adapt and shift. Maybe shifting a little bit about that, in terms of organization challenges to increase their speed to market and increase their productivity and services. Could you give an example, maybe in terms of a success with one of your clients, and where would some of the challenges that they have experienced?
Well, I think it's going to be back to that COVID application, which is the best example. And the challenges were, I think proper change management is absolutely necessary if you're going to introduce an application from one day to the next. They were working with Excel and emails, and from the day to the next, no training, no nothing, they get a new application. How do you do that? How do you actually do that? I think it's two different things. Taking care of UI, UX, and intuitivity. That's absolutely important, very important. The team has to keep in mind that the people who are going to use the application from the one day to the next, they won't have any training. It has to be super intuitive. So you're going to build it fast, but you have to focus on that. And the other part is being able to change the software on a daily basis. If you deliver a software in the middle of a crisis, you don't have time for proper process mapping and deciding upfront all the outcomes and all the ifs and else branches in terms of what happens if. So you're not going to do everything in it if you deliver a solution to a client. It's very important that on a daily basis for the first few weeks, and that's what we've done. We talk to the client and getting feedback from nurses and people that are working on those cases of what was not working for them, because we truly created that software within a few days. It took weeks to stabilize and make it like kind of in its final form, but in just a few, I think a week or two, they were able to start working with the software. And the fact that we have a hyper agile software, and that's going to get back to maybe eventually, if we have time, to talk about how does agility change with low-code, because agility is it 1 week sprints, 1 month sprints, or 2 days sprints? And it makes a big difference when you work on a 2-day sprint. So what it means, you talk to the client, even if once it's in production, and you have to have the right tools to change the software and update it so that the next day people see the change they needed without being without disrupting or disturbing their activity. So that's super fluid. So the ability to embrace change in the methodology and in the tool set is very important. So I think those are challenges that we've overcome thanks to the methodology and the technology.
And I think it's a really important aspect of, I think we're all trying, when you said crisis, I keep thinking, well, that's our day-to-day probably for most of us, where it doesn't just, not to obviously to that same extent, but I think the expedited perception and or reality that is ours now of delivery faster, more reliable, more secure is just becoming the norm. It's so thinking about how do we do that? How do we leverage really the low code, no code capabilities? And as you've outlined, building that agility into it with a more intuitive way that end users are utilizing it. The change management is a lot easier because you don't have this huge uptake that it requires a significant amount of resources for training and process changes and what have you. Starts to really change the dynamic of the organization and the delivery. And I think it also positions technology in more of a partnership role as well.
Really, that's really true. And I think it kind of brings us back to, 2001's Agile Manifesto: working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change instead of trying to follow a plan. If you're going to collaborate IT or as a solution creator with the client, it's all about that collaboration. It's not. It's very hand in hand. We're building the software together. It's not you tell me the specs or you tell me your need and I build the software. We're building it together. You're involved on a daily basis, looking at this project and this this software being created, and the client or product owner or whoever is on the business unit is involved in the process in a much more. Much more involved than in a traditional approach, I think.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think that kind of brings it nicely together, just in terms of when we look at all of the components that you need to take into account, consider it's not just the technology, it's the people, as kind of where we started from. It's the people, the process, the ability to execute and deliver value to the organization. And this is one way to be able to do it in a really effective, quick turnaround, engaging way for the organizations that are going to benefit, and position the technology teams to really be a differentiator for organizations.
Yeah, and making it simple for clients is important, I think.
Yeah. Intuitive.
The line of business, on the business side, their time should be spent doing what they do on the business side, not reviewing and being stuck in development projects where it's super time consuming for them. They want the software solutions, not necessarily the process that they have to go through that process. That's mandatory. But if you do it with a very agile way and with the right tool set, it can be a very fun experience. In fact, one of my clients, not IT, business unit, said creating one of these applications was one of the best professional experience of his life. Being part of that and being the person that says, this is how I envision my process and my unit and my hospital. This is how I want it to work. And after a few weeks, few months, they had the expected software, and that's how he perceives it. I think it's invaluable.
I'm so sorry to have to jump in here, Sylvain, Rita. This has been a remarkable conversation, but we did promise our audience a little bit of time for Q&A. So thank you. And like I say, I hate to get to this place, but we need to open it up and open up to the audience. So I think what we'll do is we're going to kind of come full screen so that we can see everybody and get everybody's hands. If you have a question, please just kind of put your hand up, and I will do my best to try to get you in sequence. We are short on time, so please, if we don't get to your question, we're going to provide you with the contact information, with Sylvain's contact information, and you can continue this conversation afterwards. I know Sylvain would be really happy to hear from you. So, are there any questions that I can call on? Okay, so we have a question from Prashi.
Yeah. So hi, Sylvan and
Hi.
everyone. So currently I'm interning with CIOCAN, and but I have a vast experience working with development teams and deploying and in production support. So as you were saying that we are now moving towards having working closely with production environment and like having a proper change management system so that the changes are actually like quickly delivered to the clients. So I wanted to understand, are we going to move from working in different environments, for example dev, QA and production, or are we going to directly work in production, like all the testing, everything works in production? Is it what we are moving towards?
No, well, I'd say no. I would say no, and that's a great question. Speed doesn't mean cutting corners, and deploying changes to production right away, real time, is very, very specific. And I think that if you look at it from the way we build software traditionally, the software development life cycle hasn't been made for no reason. It's there because you need to create, you need teams to collaborate on projects, be able to pull and push changes and transition those changes to a QA environment, and then to a training environment, and then to production. And it's very important that the tools that you use allow you for this very planned life cycle for software, and as well as giving you a way into creating what I would call hot fixes. Let's say, just give you an example, a team is working on something and they've been working for 2 weeks, staging changes that they plan on releasing in 2 weeks, and suddenly there's a bug that needs to be fixed. You have to be able to do that without disturbing, without accidentally pushing all the work you've been staging for 2 weeks. So it doesn't remove that. I can see cases where in citizen development, a citizen developer user would want to add a field to a runtime application, pretty much the same way you would do it in Salesforce or HubSpot. You can go as a manager and add new fields, and you're not necessarily doing it in a different environment. But in terms of delivering software, if we look at it as a software development initiative, it has to be fully supported with proper lifecycle management, and possibly even automating deployments where you think they fit in terms of time and things like that. So that doesn't change that at all, nor does it change the need for proper version control and being able to revert and adjust the same expectations from traditional development.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. So then we have a question from Jim.
Yes, thank you. Some years ago, we tried to implement a BPM, business process management, or low code solution. It was somewhat disastrous. We had to abandon that project, unfortunately, and so I'm a little gun shy about anything new these days. Really need to test it and prove it out. My question for you specifically is, you're representing a product. I'm not familiar with the product, but what kind of use cases would you say your product is suitable for?
That's a good question, and I'm going to answer it somewhat quickly, I'd say, and then we can expand on that on a one-on-one if you want to, but it's low code is a category, right? So there's enterprise application development, there's workflow automation, there's no code or low code applied to several things. So what you seem to be describing is a project about business process automation, not necessarily creating an application. Our platform is to create application, and what I mean by application here is a front end, a middleware, APIs, and a database. So some call it could be a full-scale application or a collection of mini apps, but they are generally comprised of front end, data and workflows, and database. So I don't know if what you're describing is more about maybe back office, no UI automation with other solutions like BPMS and things like that. That's a different product than the one we do.
Okay. Okay, we have time for one more question. Todd.
Hey, thanks very much. What do you suggest for organizations that may not have developers on staff? How would they typically get started on no code, low code?
Well, first they could rely on the platform provider or their partners to use no code and get the benefits of no code without touching the tool. That's one way. The other way is training non-pro developers but IT people into becoming no coders, and I think that makes a lot of sense, because I was relating to that a little bit earlier. Is that IT analysts, they understand problems, they understand solutions, they just don't know how to code. So they will very often be able to create the solutions themselves. Where they will need training on is UI and UX, data modeling, but those are things that are much easier to learn than coding. So if you need to send them to some training on UI and UX, and it's not UI like they're going to have to know CSS in and out. It's about just good rules of how to lay an application, and I think that's totally in their something they can learn. And data modeling, for some of them, it's already in their bag of tricks, and for others it's more training. But I think it's a good way to start, is just empowering IT people who are interested. Sometimes that maybe today they are working in other type of automation projects, or trying to do initial analysis or functional analysis of requirements. They're a very good candidate for the role of a solution creator.
I would just add to that, Todd, also, in my company specifically, it's bringing the SMEs and a lot of the experience that comes along with that really does have a really good complement of them being able to see that they're being empowered as well. But to Sylvain's point, you need that governance, because you don't want that going off and all of a sudden you have all these production processes or applications that you can't, all of a sudden when they break, you still need to manage. So I think there's multiple different ways of, depending on your organization, how you can navigate through that. Well, with that, I know we're at time. I want to thank Sylvain so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. He's a wealth of information. I always learn so much when we get a chance to connect. This has been very insightful conversation, and I really appreciate the use cases that you were able to bring forward as well, just to make it more applicable. Perfect. Sorry?
It's a pleasure.
I was just going to say, and it just flicked, so I was getting panicking, but thank you for bringing this slide back. In here, I encourage you to download the copy of the white paper for more information. I think that would be helpful. You can scan the QR code on the screen as well and get that. That will be fantastic. If there's any additional questions arise, as Lorraine has said, Sylvain has been kind enough to provide his contact information on the left-hand side. Please feel free to reach out to him. And then I'm going to put in my little blurb about CIOCAN. So for those who are not CIO Association of Canada members, CIOCAN as we call for short, I would encourage you to visit our website, www.ciocan.ca, and sign up for your membership. There's so many benefits, and being a member really does kind of contribute to a strong technology community and just brings a lot of opportunities to engage and collaborate with your peers. And with that, thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.